Morning, everyone. Pleasure to be here with you. I have some quick slides. I work for the UNFCCC Secretariat, or the UN Climate Change Secretariat, where we basically support the process, the political process, the intergovernmental process on climate change. So I have a few slides to share with you on this International Women's Day event about the linkages between the work that we do on climate and food. I don't expect, or I don't intend these slides to be comprehensive. The topic is super broad. I'm just referring to very high level linkages. The expertise for food and climate lies more with the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, or FAO. They are the ones who lead on this work. So in spite of that, I hope this will be useful and give you some additional food for thoughts. So as I said very quickly, the UNFCCC Secretariat is the organization within the United Nations system that supports the UNFCCC, which is the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. So it's an intergovernmental agreement, and we are the organization that supports all the work done under that agreement. And that agreement also includes the Kyoto Protocol and the Paris Agreement, which I'm sure you have heard about lately. The key aspect of this is we tend to focus on supporting national governments, which are our main interlocutors, our main stakeholders, and our bosses. But they have also asked us to work more and more with everybody else. We call them non-party stakeholders. So everybody else in society, private sector, academia, NGOs, civil society, etc. And we do that through a series of initiatives. The final goal is to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement, which are or can be summarized as keeping global warming to 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, so around above 1750, and adapting to the changes that are already happening and will continue to happen in the foreseeable future. Even if we stop emitting greenhouse gases today, immediately, the changes in climate will continue for centuries. So we need to work also on adapting to that. And that is a very important aspect for agriculture, actually. Then, just to make sure we are all on the same page, but I'm sure that you are all familiar with climate change. Basically, what is happening is that the atmosphere that surrounds our planet contains a certain type of gases that we call greenhouse gases that create a greenhouse effect around the planet. So they trap energy coming from the sun in the form of heat. And that is good because without any global warming effect, we would have an average global temperature below 0 degrees Celsius. So it would be quite inhospitable for life. But the problem is through our use mainly of fossil fuels, but also other activities that include agriculture. That's the link with, or one of the links with food. We are increasing the amount of those greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, causing a rapid increase in the global temperature, faster than we have ever seen in geological history, as far as we know. And we have data for the last 1 million years. So this is the fastest period of warming that we have seen in the last million years. Now, the issue with climate is not just that we are going to get some hotter summers, right? And maybe some warmer winters in some places. It's the issue is that there are a lot of interlinkages between the different elements that make up our climate and our planet, right? And the nature in our planet. So if we reach, from what you can see on this slide, is a very complicated set of linkages between different ecosystems and different aspects of the climate system. And what it tries to highlight is that there are some so-called tipping points beyond which it will be very difficult to recover. So for example, if the Amazon becomes a savanna, if we lose completely the ice cover in the North Pole and Greenland, things like this, the warming will become much worse and probably irreversible, with enormous impact for our society. And when I say enormous impact, it means most likely the end of our modern society. That's why climate change has been called the defining issue of our generation, the defining issue of our time, and has been called the biggest challenge that we face today and a threat to the existence of our society. That's why also climate change is at the top, in many cases, number one as threat to global peace and global development. If we fail to face climate change, we will fail in everything else, including ensuring access to food for everyone, including women's equality or gender equality. So climate change is not just about temperature, it's not just about the environment, it's actually about the continuity of our society as we know it today, and that has to be very clear. We fail to face climate change, our society as we know it comes to an end. According to the latest report that we have from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, which is this group of scientists from all over the world that advise politicians, we are already at about 1.1 degrees Celsius of warming above pre-industrial levels. And we need to remain under 1.5, maximum 1.5. We know that if we go more than 1.5, situation will be very, very difficult. So we need to keep it at a maximum 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming. We are already at 1.1. We might reach 1.5 in the next 10 years if things continue as they are today. That's why the urgency, that's why you hear about climate change all over the place. It's because it's not the only challenge we are facing. It may not be the most important one, depending on your opinion, but it is the most urgent. And once again, if we fail in facing it, we will fail in facing all other challenges. That's why the urgency. And 1.5 degrees may not sound as too much, but if you consider the amount of energy that is required to warm all the global oceans, 1.5 degrees Celsius, it's an unimaginable amount of energy. And we are putting it in our oceans, in our air, and even in land. So the amount of energy that we are talking about is actually enormous. Now, where are these greenhouse gases that are causing the problem coming from? So we know without a doubt that they come from human activities, right? The human activities are the ones responsible for the sharp increase in greenhouse gases and therefore temperature that we are seeing. There is no doubt. Now, the majority comes from generation of energy, as you can see from this also complex graph. But second in importance is land use. And this is where the link with food becomes clearer. I mean, we need energy, of course, to produce our food, to maintain the cooling, to do the transportation. So there is a link on energy use, energy generation with food as well. But more directly, agriculture is responsible for around 40% of our emissions. And in general, land use is responsible for a quarter of all emissions that we produce. So it's a very significant contributor to climate change. So when we think about sustainable food production, we also have to think about the climate impact. And that is not to mention the impact that climate change is going to have on the production of foods around the world. Of course, when the weather changes, obviously the kind of crops that you can grow change as well. Now, climate is just one part of a wider sustainability agenda that the previous speakers already referred to, at least indirectly. When we talk about equal access to food, when we talk about collaboration and cooperation as a way to ensure that we are avoiding waste and doing things the best way possible. Like we were hearing about the challenge on the information flow. So we need collaboration, and we need collaboration in a wider set of topics. Right? We need to think, we need to see, to look beyond the immediate sphere or value chain, let's say, of food production, and we have to look at the whole system that the planet is, if we are going to have, or if we are going to find really successful solutions. And that is the challenge, right? As you have seen from the previous slides, the planet and our society is very complex. So what we are doing here, when we are talking about becoming more sustainable and becoming climate friendly, what we mean is we have to transform everything that we do as a society. And this is reflected in the Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development and its Sustainable Development Goals. There are 17 goals. One of them only is climate. But it's, as I said, probably the most urgent one. And something that many people don't or are not very familiar with is that the agenda is built on 5 pillars. You're maybe familiar with the triple bottom line of people, planet, profit in business. Well, here it turns into people, planet, prosperity. So prosperity has a broader sense than economic or financial profit. And then you add partnership and peace, because as we were saying, without collaboration, without partnership, we are not going to achieve any of these goals. And without peace, even less, right? And without achieving those goals, we are not going to have peace either. So partnership, peace, people, planet, prosperity, 5 P's. Now, climate change, when one talks about that, it's usually about the gloom and doom, right? So basically, everything that I have said before is about the danger that climate change represents. And it's true. And we have to keep it in mind. It's a very serious threat that we are facing right now. And it's a very big one, a very big problem to solve. However, there are also, let's say, positive aspects to climate change. Let me first refer maybe to some of the risks that organizations face because of climate change. And if you're an individual interested in this topic, you can also probably understand what the risks for individuals, for us as individuals, as families, as communities also face. But basically, we have 2 types of risks. Transition risks, so we need to transform our society from where we are today to that sustainable society we need. And organizations, and therefore any other stakeholder that does not align with that transition, with that change, is at risk of being left behind. Right? And this is something that you can see now in the private sector, with so many companies now running to try to change their business model or try to demonstrate that they are changing their business model to become more climate friendly, more sustainable. Because they know that there will be more public pressure, more scrutiny, and later on, definite market changes that will leave them behind if they don't change. So there are a series of risks associated to this transition to a more sustainable society. And then, of course, you have the usual physical risks. That is what everybody thinks about when we say climate change, which is all these extreme weather events and the long-term changes in weather patterns, right, that may impact. And in the case of agriculture, that is one of the most important ones, the long-term change of weather in the different locations around the world. But then there are also opportunities, as this is what I wanted to highlight a little bit. Climate change, if it has something positive, if anything, is that it is forcing us to work together. Right? Even if we didn't want to, we have to. If we are going to face this threat successfully, we have no option but to collaborate. No one, not one government, not one company, no one can solve this issue together, alone. And if we don't solve it, right, we are all going to face the consequences, right? So we really need to work with everybody to make sure that everybody's doing their own part to contribute to the solution. So if there's something positive, it's that it is forcing us to work together, but it's also forcing us to innovate, and you can see it in companies. Tesla is one of the famous examples, right? Transforming the way that we have mobility, individual or private mobility. But there are so many other innovations that are happening in the private sector and beyond, like what we were hearing previously also on using technology to improve agricultural production, experimenting, etc. So there is a lot of potential for innovation and positive change. And finally, many of these things, like for example, transforming to renewable energy, more sustainable transportation, adapting our food production, making it more sustainable, we need to do anyway. Climate change or not, we need to do it. It's good for the environment, it's good for our health, and in most cases, it's good also for our pockets. It's good for the bottom line, the financial bottom line. So we should be doing it anyway. And climate change is forcing us to look at it very, very hard, seriously. Now, before I go to this, which is the last slide, just to mention, in the case of agriculture or food production, of course, the main linkages with climate neutral now, with climate action, sorry, remain transportation, right? The production and transportation, the use of energy for that. And second, the adaptation to the changes that we're seeing. And again, there are opportunities. Areas of the world that have been maybe neglected, or where the production of food has not been very successful in the past, may become in the future more suitable for production in some cases. In many other cases, production will become even more difficult. So that increases even more the need for equity, for collaboration, if we are going to ensure that our society continues to exist and that we maintain peace globally. Just to give you an example of what this all means, the Syrian civil war has been linked to climate change. There were many elements that caused the civil war, of course, but the extended drought that the country suffered, which has been attributed, at least in part, to climate change, was the final straw that detonated an already difficult situation. This civil war has not only ravaged Syria, but it also caused an influx of immigrants to Europe, or refugees coming to Western Europe, looking for safety and opportunities. This influx of refugees put in turn a lot of pressure on European governments and Western European governments. And Western Europe is indeed one of the richest regions in the world, with some of the richest countries in the world, and is also one of the areas a group of countries that have been very vocal on human rights. And in spite of that, they were under a lot of pressure, and you saw an uptake, a surge in extreme right or far right groups and political parties. Some of them even taking power, were very close to coming to power in many countries. So if 1 million refugees caused such a big problem, such a big challenge for one of the richest areas in the world, imagine what would happen in the future when we have tens of millions or hundreds of millions of climate refugees looking for a better place to live. We will not be able to cope. So becoming more sustainable in all areas of human activity, but including, of course, food production, is key. We don't have a choice. It's that easy. We don't have a choice, isn't it? Good, and then I just wanted to close with a reference to an initiative that we lead that is called Climate Neutral Now. It's all about promoting action to achieve global climate neutrality, so no more increase in greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, by recognizing and promoting action by mainly organizations. Individuals can also do it, but we focus on organizations. So if you're an organization that wants to receive some support and also recognition for acting to estimate your greenhouse gases, try to reduce them, acting to reduce them, contributing through compensation of emissions or other options, and then report publicly, regularly, so annually, this initiative may be for you, and we have it precisely to promote action and to recognize those who are taking action. Good, and with that, I leave it there. Thank you so much.
What, in your opinion, are the most immediate things that should be done to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, or the actions that can have the greatest impact in a short time frame? And really, I suppose, what it's aiming at is what projects should be prioritized in climate neutral now?
Thank you. So it's a tough question, but in general terms, we need to do two things. We have to transform our energy generation matrix from the current one, which is based on fossil fuels, coal, oil, to a renewable one. That's priority number one. Very closely followed by electrification of transportation as much as possible. We need to also shift transportation to electric means, of course, using renewable energy, renewable electricity. And the third one is probably the most directly related to this topic, which is protecting, enhancing, or restoring and growing as much as possible the natural areas that we have. So whatever we have left in both in ocean and in land, we need to protect. They are reservoirs of carbon, and we need to keep them healthy and grow them even as much as possible. So those three: transform the way we generate energy, transform the way we move, and we move everything, and finally protect and grow natural areas. Those are, I think, the three key immediate actions.